Hi folks, this is a VR to Smoking Fireman, and I'm smoking one of my corncob pipes, and in it I've got McClelland's Best of Breed. I think it's called Best of Breed, I've forgotten now, and I've left the thing over there, but never mind. It's an aromatic, very nice. Smoking Fireman wanted us to give him our favourite childhood memory. Well, I don't have many favourite memories from childhood. My childhood was a very violent one and a very abusive one. But there were one or two things that happened that really I enjoyed. We lived by some marshes in Norfolk, and I spent a lot of my life wandering the marshes and watching nature and using my air gun. And one day I was down on the marshes, and there was a man with one of those big buckets digging out the marshes, this steam machine, and he was dredging the marshes for mud. And when he stopped for a cup of tea, he called me over. And he was a magician. And he showed me a couple of magic tricks, and I sat down and shared his flask of tea, and we just sat talking. And we did that virtually every day during my school summer holidays. We'd spend time, when he had a break, just talking together. And he actually treated me like an adult, although I was only about 9 years old. We'd spend time looking at nature, we'd spend time talking about things. And he'd do the occasional magic trick. And I called him the Magic Man, because to me that's what he was. But one day at the end of the school holidays, I went down onto the marsh, and he wasn't there. He'd finished his job. And I felt quite sad that he'd left. You ask what got us interested in smoking. Well, I tried smoking just after I got married and had children, but I didn't know how to smoke a pipe, and it wasn't really a great success. I had a Falcon pipe at the time, and I kept getting tongue burn, and the pipe tasted terrible, and I just didn't know really a bit about pipe smoking at all. And in the end I gave up. That is until my son started smoking. He's always been a bad influence on me as the Wharf Valley boy. Because of him I got my first tattoo. He had one, and I thought, well, I'm 50, why don't I get one? And then a few years later he started smoking. Excuse me, this is a bit useless. I'm going to take the filter out. And he introduced me to the YTPC. And I said to Carolyn, would you mind if I started smoking? And she wasn't too happy because I'd given up smoking cigarettes years ago. But she said yes. And I said, I'll smoke outside. And she said, no. She said, it's your hobby. You'll smoke inside. We do our hobbies together. Which I thought was quite brilliant of her. Very lucky I am. And that's how I started smoking. And I've never looked back. My greatest pleasure at times is to have an occasional smoke with Tim when I see him, which isn't very often because he's in Leeds and I'm in Newcastle. And sort of Carolyn's fairly difficult in getting around now with her illnesses. So it's not always easy for me to get away. But occasionally I do, and we have a smoke, and we went to the pipe fair together. So that's a favourite childhood memory and how I got interested in smoking. I like your channel. I think you're going to go far in the community. We've got a lot of firemen here. And, you know, you'll have a lot to share with them. And I'm sure you've got a lot of wisdom to share in the pipe community in your videos. So I wish you all the best for that. And thank you for doing a giveaway. I'm going to end with a joke. It's about a vicar who, his sermons weren't really very good. And on a Sunday morning he was going to church and his wife was staying at home. So he said to his wife, I think I'll preach a sermon on sailing today about what it's like to sail in a boat and how Jesus was a boatman and that kind of thing. So he wanders off to church, and halfway down the road, God speaks to him and says, look, there's a lot of misuse of sex going on around here, and I want you to preach a sermon on sex and the right use of sex. So when he gets to church, he preaches this wonderful sermon, a brilliant sermon. His congregation are sat on the edge of their seats. And one of the women who leaves church early, leaves church before the vicar, sees the vicar's wife in her garden. And do you know, your husband preached the most wonderful sermon this morning. It was a brilliant sermon. His wife looks at her and she said, well, I can't understand it. He only tried it twice, and once his hat blew off, and the second time he was sick.